Well, hey everybody. I am delighted to be together today. Looking forward to this conversation. So go ahead and get started, shall we? All right. Let's start with a question today. When you think about the state of abundance, are you a visitor or are you a resident? When some form of abundance comes into your experience, maybe that's a new client, maybe that's a large chunk of money, maybe you just made a big purchase that you've been planning, maybe it's a vacation that you've been anticipating. Whatever it is, are you able to stay super present in the unfolding? Or do you find yourself in this place of waiting for the other shoe to drop or having to do so many mental gymnastics to prove to yourself, prove to the universe that you deserve to have this stay around? Are you in a place of being really, truly happy for this particular piece of abundance? But then, as soon as you felt happy now, your brain switches over into worrying about what's coming next and how will it come? And if I've already received this, then how will I get what's next? Or do you simply expect abundance? Are you able to sit in delight in whatever comes your way, knowing that more is following? Are you in that place of trusting that you don't have to know everything right now? In order to have abundance that stays, you must have a receiving identity that matches being a resident of the state of abundance. Welcome to the Abundance That Stays series. This series is all about the inner structural shifts that are required for abundance to become sustainable rather than hit or miss. I just want to reiterate that abundance that stays isn't about receiving something and holding onto it super tightly and never letting it go. I've had a lot of clients who are like, yeah, I brought in all this money, but I don't want to spend it. I'd like to see it accumulate in my accounts. And when I go to spend it, then I feel anxious, worried, afraid. So, to be clear, having a pot of money that you never do anything with is not abundance that stays. Abundance that stays is having a large capacity for abundance to flow through your experience. And that as things come into your experience, you feel a sense of comfort because they're a match, that they're a match to what you truly know is what you truly know is yours and yours to hold. Okay. For those who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Bloom. I'm a soul abundance guide, and I am all about helping people make the mental, emotional, or spiritual shifts that are required to create an internal receiving architecture so that you can finally have what you want. Okay. All right. So let's recap the series a little bit. In the first episode, we talked all about capacity. What is your capacity for abundance? And the example I used was, let's say that you want to be an Olympic swimmer, and instead what you build in your backyard to practice is the size of a wading pool. If you try to pour all of the abundance that would be represented in an Olympic sized swimming pool into this small wading pool, you're going to have devastating results, right? There's no way to be able to hold all of the millions of gallons of water that would go into that Olympic pool. Okay? So the first piece of structure to look for is, what is my capacity? The next pillar, the next piece of structural architecture for abundance that stays is looking at what your reaction is when any form of abundance comes into your experience. Think about it being, let's use another metaphor here. Let's imagine abundance as a house. And abundance comes knocking at the door. Do you crack the door, or do you have a lot of tension in your body and push abundance away, not let abundance in through the door? Okay, so capacity, what's your reaction? And then today, our conversation is going to be all around your receiving identity. So receiving identity is the internal narrative you hold about who you are in relationship to goodness. You can think of it as your set point of how much you feel like you belong inside of goodness. You can think about set point like a thermostat. Where do you set your thermostat in the winter? Where do you set your thermostat in the summer? You're going to have a specific degree that you set your thermostat at, and then there's measurement, right? If you go a little bit above, it's going to turn things off. If you go a little bit below, it's going to turn things on. Okay, same thing with your receiving identity. It acts as a set point to what you allow in and out of your system. Now, receiving identity has nothing to do with your confidence level as to what you should have. It has nothing to do with the mental affirmations or mindset work that you do to try to bring things in. It's not really even surface beliefs. Receiving identity goes deeper than those surface beliefs. Receiving identity is all about a sense of belonging. Do I belong inside wealth? Do I belong inside steady love? Do I belong inside consistent support? Do I belong inside being visible, heard, seen? Or am I only a visitor in those things? Can I expect to get kicked out at any time? So your receiving identity is core. It isn't necessarily truth, meaning we can have receiving identities that don't match our essential nature, that don't match the truth of our own divinity, and the fact that we truly are these bridges of, we as humans are bridges between the divine and earth, and we flow divine resources through us all the time. Right? So your receiving identity, which we'll talk about how to look at your individual receiving identity in a minute, but you could have a receiving identity that has nothing to do with truth, and it is a core part of your experience with abundance. So why is that? Your system, and we can even specifically say your brain, is constantly scanning for coherence. And what that means is your brain feels safest when your external reality and your internal identity match. When those two things match, your system can relax because it's what's expected. Expected means safe, safe means staying alive. And ultimately, that's the only job of our brain. Right? So, if something shows up in your day-to-day life that exceeds your sense of belonging, the brain goes, that's inconsistent. It's not, your brain isn't judging it as good or bad or right or wrong. It's just not a match. And when something feels inconsistent with who you believe you are, your brain is going to work to resolve that tension. It's going to work to resolve that difference. So either it will expand your identity to match what's coming in from the outside, or it's going to collapse your results. Unless you consciously shift your belonging, the path of least resistance, the easier route, is generally to reduce your results, to reduce what's coming in. And we see this all the time. You have a couple of really great months of income, and then it settles back into your normal pattern. It can look like, if love is the form of abundance that you're looking for, it can look like a relationship that is deepening and it's amazing, and then it falls apart, destabilizes. It can look like getting some really amazing support, and then all of a sudden you're on your own again. Okay? And this isn't happening because you are specifically sabotaging. That the sabotage is actually comes out of the mismatch. Okay, so the first thing that happens is your brain goes, yeah, no, this doesn't feel comfortable. I don't like this. Something needs to happen. And then perhaps you go into self-sabotage. But the actual aspect that you want to look at so that you can change it and transform it so that you can shift more into this abundance that stays, is that you have to look at that internal identity and realize that when something is feeling inconsistent, it's simply that your internal identity hasn't yet recognized that particular level of goodness as truth. Okay? From an energetic viewpoint, you're only going to stay open to what feels like home. If a certain amount of wealth feels foreign, you're going to shut down to the flow of universal resources. It's like you're going to literally put up stop signs to the universe that says, yeah, nope, nope, I don't want any more of that. I can't handle any more of that. Doesn't make any sense to me. Right? If a real, steady, supportive love feels unfamiliar, you're going to end up questioning it. If visibility, being seen, being heard feels larger than your sense of who you are, you're going to shrink. So these are all experiences that we've all had, right? We're asking for something bigger than is part of our own internal identity. Receiving identity determines what you are able to stay open to. It determines what you normalize. It determines what your brain says, yes, this makes sense. I see a lot of people, and I would include myself in this. I see a lot of people who have the beginning of understanding that there's a mismatch. And that's why we do affirmations, right? Like that's where that tool comes in. We're saying, okay, I'm ready to affirm that something that I'm going to have something different than what is my current experience. I'm going to affirm wealth. I'm going to affirm being seen. I'm going to affirm being heard. I'm going to affirm being in the flow of divine resources. I'm going to affirm my divinity. I'm going to affirm my self-worth. But when we're doing affirmations, we're saying those words at the cognitive level. It does not reach the level of receiving identity. So you can't force yourself to believe that you deserve more. You shift your receiving identity by incrementally expanding the range of goodness that feels natural. It's becoming someone who feels at home in abundance. Okay? And we do that by working with beliefs. We do that by by developing a relationship with money. We do that by understanding that we are divinity. Right? We do that by shifting into a new level of beliefs. Right? We have to feel like we belong inside abundance because we don't stay where we don't feel we belong. When your sense of belonging expands, so does what you can sustainably receive. Okay? All right. So let me give you just a few practical ways of noticing whether you are more of that visitor in abundance or whether you're more somebody who is a resident in abundance. If you are a visitor inside abundance, there's going to be a part of you that's surprised by your success. It's like, oh, that came out of the blue. How amazing. And not in a good way, right? You are going to constantly be waiting for the drop off. Well, this was great, but what's tomorrow going to bring? I wonder what kind of bills are going to come to match this. Or this is really great. I'm going to have some stellar months, and then there's going to be a drought again. You'll notice yourself overperforming to justify what's present for you. There's going to be thoughts about, I need to earn this. Do I deserve this? I don't know that I earned this. How do I prove that I earned it? When you are a resident in that state of abundance, things that you would notice is you expect steadiness. And again, not from the perspective of, okay, I have this small amount and I'm going to hold it, and so it's always going to be here. No, you expect, and there's a flow of abundance, right? There's in, there's out, there's in, out, 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 in. There is a flow, but when you live in that state of abundance, you expect steadiness. You expect that there's more on its way. You are going to be able to receive with a simple thank you. Okay. You create your plans for creating further abundance from a place of security rather than fear. Okay. Now, one of the things we need to talk about in this space, because I've used the word expect a number of times, and I get a lot of pushback on that word expect. People will tell me, yeah, but when I expect something, that's when I really get myself into trouble. I'm too attached if I expect something. It's arrogant to think about expecting goodness to be in my day-to-day life. And so there's a couple of things to say about that. I think we mix up expectation and entitlement. The story I tell about this is I have an amazing woman who does my hair, and she's in demand, always in demand. Her schedule is always booked. I always put my appointment on the calendar every 6 weeks. There's always an appointment on the calendar because I know she's busy. But my bangs grow like wildfire. So I will drop in for a bang trim. And she doesn't like to put those on the calendar. She'd rather fit people into her open spaces, which is cool. I have an expectation that when I text Rhonda, when I call Rhonda, my expectation is that my impetus to reach out to her will align with an opening in her schedule. I always get in within the next couple of days. That's expectation. On the flip side of that is entitlement. She shares that she has a client who she was local for a while and now is out of town and will travel to back to where her salon is for see family or other things. And she believes that when she comes to town, that Rhonda should have an opening. Well, I'm here. You need to cut my hair. That's entitlement. Okay. So carrying expectation about abundance is about being rooted in who you are. Being rooted in the knowing that I am divinity and divine resources flow through me. So what I want and need is available. That's expectation, as opposed to, well, just give me what's mine. Entitlement. Or I'm going to take from you because I need this. And there's a limited amount and I'm just going to take it because it should be mine, should be mine, should be mine. That's entitlement. Or I'm going to structure all of these systems so that I win and you lose. I get it, you don't. That's entitlement. Right? So it has nothing to do with being arrogant. It has to do with being rooted in divine truth. Because when you're rooted in divine truth, you know that not only you flow abundance, but so does everybody else on the planet. Everybody has access to this. Okay. The other point that people make about expectation is, well, if I expect it and I don't get it, I'm going to be hurt. Or if I expect it, now I'm super attached to it and I need it to happen for me. It's better to have low expectations so that I can be okay if something isn't present. And when something shows up, I can just be surprised. There is, and this is a conversation for a later time, but there is something to being non-attached. The more attached we are, the more we have to, we really have to be in alignment. But when you dampen your expectations, you slow the flow of resources to you. You could have Niagara Falls, but when you take out your expectations and you're just like, well, I don't know, we'll see. Now you get a dry creek bed with a little bit of a trickle running through it. You're not asking for it. Okay. It is true that the more general your ask, the easier it is to expect. So it's much easier for me to anticipate and expect that I get all my needs and wants met by the universe, and the how will show up, and I have to listen for it and step into action, but the how will show up, rather than saying, I'm going to write a best-selling book that brings me millions of dollars. That's how it's going to come, and I'm going to expect that, right? The more detailed you get in your expectation, the more you better be rooted in your divine truth. Or if I'm expecting, I expect a six-figure check and it's coming into my bank account tomorrow, and it's going to come from this person. Okay. Yes, that level of expectation, unless you can hold your alignment, unless you can stay without any sort of any disbelief, right? That's going to be hard to hold, particularly at the beginning. Okay. So what I want you to notice is what you think about expectation. What do you think about it in terms of it being entitlement, or whether it becomes an attachment that's hard to handle? All of that is actually part of your receiving identity. If you carry a belief that expectation is entitlement and I don't want to be one of those jerks, that becomes part of your receiving identity, and you're going to have to work through that, around that, in order for you to be able to receive what you want. Okay? So remember, living in that state of abundance is not about arrogance. It is about finding your steady state so that you can begin to receive. Okay. All right. So where does this even come from? Where does that receiving identity come from? And there are a whole bunch of different places that it can come from. It can come from early money modeling from the people in your life. We can't afford that. Don't get too big for your britches. It's better to give than receive. Um, any of those kinds of beliefs. It can, so very early on, you're going to catch modeling from the adults in your life. There are certainly cultural narratives that drive that receiving identity. There's a whole bunch of religious conditioning, and religious conditioning can be centered on who people become if they have too much money. That conditioning can be centered around the actual function of money and what it does or doesn't do. But even at another level, it can have to do with your own sense of worth. If you grew up with a religious background that said that you're born a sinner, or that we are, as a human being, we are unworthy, and we're simply trying to get back to that worthy space of the divine once we die, then this whole conversation about being a divine receiver is going to be inconsistent with your own identity, right? Okay. So there's early conditioning. Then there's also, what kind of experiences have you had with money? Have you had particular failures? Have you had challenges? How have you had successes? Those start to feed into our expectation about what's coming next. Okay. There can be all kinds of ceiling states that happen. I've had a number of clients who have said, if I really get what I want, I am going to be out earning anything that my parents were ever able to. And the fact that they are concerned about it means that they have parents who will measure, right? They are concerned that they're going to make their parents feel bad. Okay, so we can have a lot of ceilings put into place, whether it's family, whether it's based on gender, whether it's based on your culture, whether it's based on race. We can accidentally embody what society tells us are ceilings for our particular space on this planet. And that's real. So there's some disentangling that needs to happen. Let me take a sip of water here. So if you are here with me, you have probably already asked yourself some of these questions, but I'm going to ask you to ask yourself these questions through that lens of, where do I feel at home? What's my home state around abundance? Okay. So you get to ask yourself questions like, who did you see having money growing up? What did people think of them? What was the family narrative about people having money? Who did you see losing money? And what was the narrative around that? What level of abundance felt normal in your home? What was the family line about money? What did you learn you needed to do with money in order to be loved, or in order to be thought of as good with money? And it can be innocuous, right? I in my family structure, and this speaks to privilege in a number of ways, but in my family structure, I knew I was in elementary school when I had an understanding that I was going to go to college, and I was going to get a degree, and that was going to create a career, and that career was where money was going to come from. And that all of that was accurate, and it was done from absolute a place of love, and I had a lot of support in that pathway. The thing that I had to work on, though, was when I started my own business, I was betraying that line of thinking. And again, that is not something that my parents would have said to me. It was not a, I certainly didn't get that sort of narrative from them, but it was internal, right? I internalized, this is what you do. This is how you earn money. So there was a big switch for me to make to allow receiving, or to bring in a sense of safety around having money flow to me, not through that very step-by-step way. Okay. So again, some of these beliefs they don't have to be centered in trauma, but they are centered in what your experience was, and that identity, it becomes your identity. It becomes, this is the way it's safe. So this goes back to what I was talking about before, that your receiving identity isn't necessarily truth with a capital T. It's the truth with a lowercase t that you learned along the way. So you want to get curious about that. Right? Other questions that you can start to ask to begin to disentangle what's going on within your receiving identity. Did you have to earn love? Did you have to earn resources like money or time? What did you learn about worthiness? Did you have to earn that? Okay. So those are all questions that you can begin to think about. These are places that we go deep in the receiving immersion. Okay. And I'll talk more about that later. Right? But those are all important questions to ask. All right. Something else to think about, and we've talked about this a bit, but every identity has, you can think of it as a ceiling. And by ceiling, I mean the max amount of results that you can anticipate. When those results that you want or are receiving exceed your identity, you're going to notice tension in your body. You're going to grip. We talked about that a lot in last episode. You're going to end up sabotaging. You might overwork. Okay? If you don't expand your identity, your results are going to eventually shrink to match it. All right. Let's do a little bit deeper work around your receiving identity. I'm going to give you the question that I start with my clients. And this is such a great question because it bypasses some of the story that we've created, or it gets to the it bypasses the mental constructs we've put in place, like affirmations. It gets past all the things we think we're supposed to think so that we can have what we want, and gets to what we really want, or not what we it gets to what we really believe in that identity. So here's the structure that I want you to work with. You're going to complete this sentence. When it comes to money, you can even say when it comes to abundance, or you can, if it's a different form of abundance that you are working on, like time, love, etc. Okay. But when it comes to abundance, I'm the kind of person who. When it comes to abundance, I'm the kind of person who. And write down as many answers to that prompt as you can. You might hear answers like, I'm the kind of person who has inconsistent income. I'm the kind of person who works hard for the money. I'm the kind of person who can't rely on ease. I can't rely on anybody else. I'm the kind of person who never gets what they want. Okay. So my invitation is to take that sentence prompt and to work as many layers deep as you can go. I'm the kind of person who doesn't deserve anything. Right? And there's no judgment at all to what's coming up. None. It's information. It's actually a celebration when you come up with something like, I'm the kind of person who never gets what they want. Celebrate it, because that gives you information about where your identity is today. Identity feels like it is, it can feel like it is a structure that's unbreakable. This is my identity. This is who I am. It's never going to change. And that's inaccurate. There are certain steps to take to shift that identity. You have to be able to feel safe within that identity, but there are things, easy things to do that. Okay. but you can't make a change until you know what's there. So celebrate whatever comes up. The next step then is, these questions I don't want you to do from your brain. Right? We're going to ask that first question, talking to our brain, letting it be a human experience. But in order to get the antidote to it, you want to connect at a soul level. You want to connect with your divinity, with your godness, whatever your word is for that which is bigger than you. So you make that connection in whatever way feels right to you. And then you get to ask the question, who would I need to become internally for this level of abundance to feel normal? Or what do I get to let go to soften that descriptor? So if we work with, I'm the kind of person that doesn't get what they want, what do I get to let go of to begin to soften that? What story would I need to release? Once you have an awareness of what it is you get to shift, then you get to use the tools that you have in your toolbox to be able to soften those beliefs. I love EFT for this. And I love it for a variety of reasons. Maybe I won't get into all of that today. But when you use some sort of a body-based tool, you are plugging into your own infinite intelligence. EFT has a lot of science behind it, and you are bypassing some of those mental systems that have kept the old story in place. And again, that's a tool that we use inside of the receiving immersion. Okay. All right. So I want to say a little bit more about the inner structure that allows you to receive. There are very strong pillars that create this receiving architecture. It's not just emotions and divine energy. It's all divine energy. But it's what I'm trying to say is it's not just airy fairy woo woo. It's grounded woo woo, right? It's about your receiving architecture. So all the structure that you need to allow abundance that stays is structural. It's capacity, it's grip, it's identity, it's desire, it's repetition. We've talked about the first three now. And identity is this central, it's so important because it's like the structural beam that holds up the house. You know, I went through an HGTV phase and I loved Property Brothers. And I would just giggle when the brothers would have a couple in a home that they were renovating, right? And they would want to open, the couple would want to have everything open, and the Property Brothers would say, well, that's fine, but we need to put in a beam and it's going to be X number of thousands of dollars. And the couple would go, ooh, I don't like that price. Can you find a different engineer? Right? Like, no, the load is what the load is. And you have to have a beam so that your house doesn't collapse. Your receiving identity is that structural beam within this framework of receiving architecture. Your identity is going to hold your flow stable. For all of the reasons that we've already talked about, in terms of letting your nervous system feel safe, of there being coherence between your internal reality and your external reality. Okay? This is a key part of allowing abundance that stays. Okay, one more sip of water. All right. So go ahead and take a breath. This has been a lot of information. And let's do just a little bit of reflection. Get really curious about your own flow of abundance. And you get to ask yourself some questions. Where do I feel like a visitor in my abundance? Where do I feel already that I belong? What would it look like to let this new level of abundance that I want be normal? What are my ahas? What do I know? What came up for me? Okay. So I will leave you with those questions as we complete this conversation about receiving identity. We will use this foundation to launch into episode 4 next week. And next week's topic is all about, are you wanting or are you proving? Okay. Your receiving identity stabilizes the abundance flow, and desire, your wants, direct the flow of that abundance. So in the next episode, we are going to talk all about cleaning up your desire so that it is able to direct an incredible amount of flow of abundance towards you. Okay, so that's next time. And I just want to end by saying you don't have to earn your place inside goodness. You belong inside goodness. It's the human story that tells us that we have to earn our right to belong inside abundance. You do not have to earn it. You simply get to know that you belong there. All right, everybody. Have a really great week, and I will see you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.